Welcome to the Wellness Lab Digest, where we help you to absorb powerful, life-changing insights from top wellness experts with our daily bite-sized wellness podcast summaries. Each episode is packed with distilled, powerful takeaways to boost your health and well-being. To support this podcast, please scroll down on whatever app you're listening. Ratings and reviews are helpful. Even better, just send the show to a friend. Check out our sponsors at the bottom of the page, or simply click the Support the Show link below the episode description.
You know what blows my mind? The human body burns 75% of its daily calories just keeping us alive. Breathing, pumping blood, firing neurons, even when we're completely still. But does tracking those calories actually help us manage our weight?
That's such a fascinating way to think about it. How did you first get interested in calorie counting?
Well, like many people, I tried it for a few months last year and discovered I was absolutely terrible at estimating portions. You know what really shocked me? Learning that the whole concept of calories in food actually refers to kilocalories. We're all basically using the wrong term.
So when food labels say 100 calories, they actually mean 100,000 scientific calories? That's pretty mind-bending.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This unit was defined as the energy needed to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Scientists don't even use it anymore. They prefer joules. But we're all still stuck on calories because of this guy named Wilbur Olin Atwater.
Oh, tell me more about Atwater. What did he do?
So back in the early 1900s, Atwater developed this system that we still use today to measure the calorie content of foods. He figured out that fats contain 9 calories per gram, alcohol has 7, and both proteins and carbohydrates have 4. It's not perfect, but it's pretty remarkable how well it's held up over a century.
You know what's interesting about that system? It doesn't account for how our bodies actually process different foods. Like 100 calories of almonds versus 100 calories of soda will have completely different effects on our metabolism.
That's such a crucial point, and it leads us to one of the biggest misconceptions about calorie counting. This idea that it's just simple math. You know, calories in minus calories out equals weight change. But our bodies are incredibly complex systems.
Well, that makes me wonder, how does our body actually determine how many calories it needs?
So this is where things get really fascinating. Your basal metabolic rate, that's the energy you burn just staying alive, depends on factors like your age, gender, muscle mass, even the temperature outside. And here's something wild. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn, doing absolutely nothing.
That's because muscle tissue is metabolically active, right? Unlike fat tissue, which just, sits there.
Precisely. And this is where tracking gets tricky. Even those fancy fitness trackers that monitor heart rate, blood oxygen, and movement are still just making educated guesses about how many calories you're burning.
So what's your take on all these calorie tracking apps? Are they helping or hurting?
You know, I think they can be both helpful and problematic. Let me share a personal example. I once logged a restaurant meal in 3 different apps and got calorie estimates that varied by over 500 calories for the exact same dish. It really showed me how imprecise this whole system can be.
That's quite a significant difference. It must be especially challenging for people trying to maintain specific calorie goals.
Absolutely right. And here's another layer of complexity. Our caloric needs aren't static. They change based on countless factors, including stress levels, sleep quality, hormones, and even how well our gut bacteria are functioning on any given day.
Well, that explains why some people can follow the exact same calorie-restricted diet with completely different results.
Exactly. And let's talk about something that often gets overlooked, the psychological impact of counting calories. Some people find it helpful for understanding portion sizes and making mindful choices, while others can become obsessive and develop an unhealthy relationship with food.
That's a really important distinction. When would you say calorie counting is most appropriate?
Based on the research, it tends to be most helpful in specific situations. like when someone is trying to understand why they're not meeting their weight goals, or for athletes who need precise nutrition for performance. But it can be problematic for people who are already at a healthy weight or have a history of disordered eating.
That makes sense. It's really about finding the right tool for each person's specific situation.
Exactly. And here's something interesting about how our understanding of calories has evolved. We now know that the timing of when we eat can be just as important as how much we eat. The same meal eaten at different times of day can have different metabolic effects.
That's fascinating. So our circadian rhythms play a role in how we process calories?
They absolutely do. And get this, research has shown that our bodies might process the exact same meal differently depending on whether we're stressed, well-rested, or even if we've exercised recently. It's like our metabolism is this incredibly sophisticated symphony rather than a simple calculator.
So what would you say to someone who's thinking about starting to count calories?
I'd suggest thinking of it like learning a new language. It can be useful to understand the basics, but you don't need to count every word you speak to communicate effectively. Maybe start by just becoming more aware of portion sizes and food quality rather than obsessing over exact numbers.
That's a really helpful analogy. It takes the pressure off trying to be perfect with the counting.
And here's something else to consider. The quality of calories matters tremendously. A diet of 2,000 calories from whole, nutrient-dense foods will affect your body very differently than 2,000 calories of processed foods, even though the math is the same.
That reminds me of the old saying, you are what you eat. Though maybe it should be, you are how your body processes what you eat.
That's brilliant. And it leads us to what I think is the most important takeaway. While counting calories can be a useful tool, it's just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The goal should be developing a sustainable, healthy relationship with food, rather than getting caught up in the numbers game.
Well said. Any final thoughts on where you think this field is heading?
I think we're moving toward a more personalized approach to nutrition. With advances in technology and our understanding of genetics, we're learning that what works for one person might not work for another. The future might be less about counting calories and more about understanding our individual metabolic responses to different foods.
That's such an exciting prospect, moving from a one-size-fits-all approach to something more tailored to each person's unique biology.
Exactly. And until we get there, maybe the best approach is to use calorie counting as one tool in our toolkit rather than the only measure of our nutrition. After all, health is about so much more than just numbers on a label.
Thank you for listening to the Wellness Lab Digest. If you have received value from the podcast, I have 3 asks of you. 1, share the show with your friends and send them a link to the show. 2, please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening. And last but not least, please let me know what topics you would like us to cover in the future. You can contact me by sending me a message using the Send Us a Text link below the episode description.